So this is an independent journalist who publishes on Medium, and she's done several pieces in the last several days. This one called "The Boot is Coming Down Hard and Fast." So, excuse me if I may have my screen back, Zachary. Thank you. The very final paragraph of what she's written here is, "The correct response to a huge section of the citizenry doubting an electoral system that we've known for years is garbage would have been more transparency, not shoving the process through and silencing people who voice doubts and making that entire faction more paranoid and crazy." This is in a piece which she begins by pointing out that Biden was in fact the original framer of what would become the Patriot Act. And alongside that fact, she provides us, Caitlin Johnstone, the journalist who's written this piece, provides us a clip from an appearance on Morning Joe with the CIA analyst, former Times Now House Representative Elissa Slotkin, who is informing us that the real battle against terrorism is now inside America's border. She says, quote, "The post 9/11 era is over. The single greatest national security threat right now is our internal division, the threat of domestic terrorism, the polarization that threatens our democracy. If we don't reconnect our two Americas, the threats will not have to come from the outside." And one I find, totally appropriate response to this is from a woman named Whitney Webb, I don't know her, who quote tweets Slotkin, again, the current House representative who was a CIA analyst. Webb says, "Before Congress, Alyssa worked for the CIA and the Pentagon and helped destabilize the Middle East during the Bush and Obama administrations. What she says here is essentially an open announcement that the U.S. has moved from the war on foreign terror to the war on domestic terror." This is terrifying. And we should be considering that, I have not seen this bill that you have referenced. I don't know anything about it, that has apparently been produced in record time, right? But it is likely to be something like back in the mid-90s, Biden produced something apparently right before actually the Oklahoma bombing, produced something that was, put up there, taken down, sort of disappeared, and then repurposed effectively as the Patriot Act after 9/11. Where did the bill that is being trotted out right now start, and by whom, and to what purpose? Hopefully we come to know the answer to that. One more thing about this, though, and I'm sure you have a lot to say. Returning to Representative Slotkin's claim of two Americas, I think this is actually a further divisive and dangerous formulation. And it's old, right? We're this two-party system. There's red and blue. There's Republicans and Democrats. But I at least see no evidence of there being two Americas. I see a much, much, much more fractured state. And at the very least, we have three. At the very least, because when Trump ascended, there were many in the Republican Party who said, "No way, no how, I'm a never Trumper, I'm not going there." And similarly, as the Democrats have become woke and intersectionalist and embraced, frankly, the riots on the streets of America and other nonsense, there are many of us on the left who have said, "That's not my left. I still consider myself of the left, but not that way." And so, we have talked often about finding much common cause and many common values, but disagreeing about the current state of where we're at with regard to reasonable people on the right. There are a lot of reasonable people on the left who disavow the sort of Antifa black bloc stuff, and there are many reasonable people on the right who disavow Beowulf, in the Capitol. And that makes at least three Americas. And formulating this as two Americas effectively 100% says that if I start to critique Antifa, anyone else gets to say, "Well, then you're in the America that embraces Trump." And if someone on the right says, "I am criticizing Trump," then they are therefore in the Antifa camp. No. It's not, America is not Antifa versus Trump. No way, no how. That's not the America we live in. And if it is, we're doomed. But that's not what we see. There are, I still believe, a majority, and I hope it's a strong majority of people who are actually in the vast middle, identified as left or right, different views on how to solve the problems we have, fine. But not Antifa, not insurrectionists at the Capitol, something far more interested in actually collaborating and coming together as a country.
All right, there are two important points that we have to cover in reference to what you're describing.
Great.
So there are two Americas and there aren't. And how to describe this. So we know, and we have frequently talked about the Hidden Tribes report that says there's 67% of us that are in broad agreement about essentially nuanced, non-extreme versions of the answers to all of the problems that are supposed to divide us irreconcilably. That is clearly true. And for you and me, we have had the gift of the story that brought us to public attention has put us in contact with so many people on the center right that we know for sure because we have met them, hundreds and hundreds of people, right, who we are supposed to be on the other side of an unbridgeable gap. And it turns out actually we are in broad agreement and we have to search for things that we actually have substantial disagreement over. So that thing is real.
Yep.
What is also real is that narratively speaking, it's almost like I'm imagining there's some substance that you can drop into a room full of people who are in that vast, exhausted middle described by the Hidden Tribes, and you drop that thing in and they simply polarize to other sides because narratively speaking, we are two different Americas, right?
Yeah.
They're not the same place. And so the fact of having an exemption from, we can cross no man's land and not get shot at. In fact, we're more frequently shot at from our home side than from the other side, which often embraces us with, curiosity, if, not a little bit of perplexity, but whatever, right? Being able to transition across this boundary tells you, oh yeah, that agreement is real. But the other thing,
and there are humans on the other side.
There are humans. Yes, in fact,
there are humans everywhere.
Most of the people on the other side are every bit as recognizable. And yes, they're confused, but where is the quadrant where people aren't
and
confused?
The extremists on both sides are the ones that are difficult to grok and reckon with.
Right. They are driving the system and they are causing the narrative to be unreconcilable or irreconcilable. Okay. The other point that I want to make, so there are two Americas and there aren't is one. The other point I want to make is that every time I hear the word terrorism invoked, it sends shivers down my spine. And the reason is because I know it is a legally special word. It has been made into a legally special word. And what it causes to happen is the suspension of all of the protections that would normally be afforded to people. And so here, Zach, you want to put up that screenshot? Here's the Washington Post, and I would remind you that the Washington Post is a Jeff Bezos property, which connects it to Amazon, which is connected to the CIA. I have no idea what that has to do with what they do and don't believe and what they do and don't publish, but nonetheless.
It was one of the most terrifying sentences yet today.
Well, yeah, It's a rough one. And the thing is, I want you to pay close attention. I didn't say that I have an understanding of what goes on inside the Washington Post and why. All I can say is that it's not hard to connect the superficial dots, and that just like the fact of a biosafety level 4 coronavirus lab in Wuhan forces you to ask the question, the connection of the Washington Post to intelligence is one that it raises questions. Maybe there's some perfectly satisfying answer, but I don't know it. In any case, invoking the term terrorism causes all sorts of special...
So have you read, for people who are just listening, what this headline says?
So the headline says, what happened at the Capitol was domestic terrorism, lawmakers and experts say. Now, again, under normal circumstances, what we would make of what happened at the Capitol, I don't think it's terrorism. Now, I did call it an insurrection, right? An insurrection is the most serious of crimes. But, I actually made this point in an article that I think was so long ago, I don't even remember. I think it was published in Common Dreams after, was it the Charlie Hebdo attack?
In Paris, yeah.
And my point was, look, terror is a tactic. Its sine qua non is that an entity that doesn't have the military strength to hurt you does have potentially the ability to make you hurt yourself if it can spook you enough. So the reason that terror is at the center of that word is that terror causes you to behave in a way that is self-destructive, much like a bee does not have the power to kill you, but it might have the power to induce you into an immune reaction that might kill you.
A bee, you said.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the bee doesn't have an interest in doing that. But the point is, if it's not the bee sting that kills you, it's your immune reaction to it that kills you if you die from a bee sting. Terrorism is psychological. It's a psyop, right? And so the point is, people can be induced to doing self-harm through fear. Now the question is what happened at the Capitol, was that designed to induce fear in Americans? I don't think so. It was an insurrection, but it was not, it was not designed to be terrifying. And that thing means, I believe, that those who would say it's obviously terrorism, and what they're really saying is, you agree it's very, very bad, and therefore it's terrorism. And I do not agree that which is very, very bad is inherently terrorism.
Right. To the point, this Representative Slotkin, who seems to be suggesting that we need to move away from considering outside forces as the biggest threat to the U.S. to considering inside forces. Add to that the observation that researchers say, in quotes, that most domestic terrorism is from the right. And, in what way is that established? I have no idea, but I can guarantee you I don't have much faith in those methods. That if, these researchers are the same ones who helped turn the SPLC into an organization that has no credibility anymore, then, on what basis are a bunch of organizations being called domestic terrorist organizations on the right but not on the left? There's almost certainly political bias there. Therefore, if we are being told by representatives that the biggest threat is coming from the inside, and it has already been established, in quotes, through pseudoscientific means, but trust the authorities, that most of that domestic threat from the inside is from the right, well, then it's not hard to get to, therefore we need to be concerned about the threats from the right. And that's it.
Perfect. Now, for those of you looking for balance, I can't remember when it would have been, but somebody may find it. They will recall that I also blanched when Antifa was accused of being a terrorist organization. Now, I blanched at it for the very same reason. And I would point out what I said at the time was I remember when Occupy was taking place, and I will speak only for myself. I participated in Occupy. I should have bailed on it earlier because it got taken over by anarchists with whom I had no agreement. But nonetheless, as a person protesting the TARP program and Too Big to Fail and the financial crisis and all that led to it, to have the government say, oh, these are domestic terror, this is a terror threat, right? And therefore avail itself of all of these extraordinary exemptions and tools was truly frightening. And I don't like seeing that weapon pointed at anybody who isn't an actual terrorist. Now, the argument with respect to Antifa and Black Bloc is stronger, I believe, because in fact, it's not terror in the sense of a big explosion that causes people to misunderstand the danger that they themselves are going to be blown up. But they're
marching through neighborhoods with lights and yelling at people and breaking windows.
Waking people in the middle of the night
in their homes.
And harassing them does induce fear. So at least, there's some sort of connection. But again, I think the thing is, hey, that's a magic word. Terrorism is a magic word. And when you hear people invoking it because it then justifies the next thing that they do against somebody that maybe you don't like, boy, this is the moment that you need to stand up and say, actually, what are you doing? And
so is there sort of a Russell conjugation analog for terrorism that we could slot in here? I'm not sure there is. I'm not sure there's a simple word that we can use instead here.
Well, unfortunately what there is
going to require a little bit more language.
Yes. I think the thing is there are a lot of terms for things that don't rise to the level of terrorism.
Right. But no big category that can be slotted in at the same level of inclusiveness.
Yeah, I don't think so. And I think the answer is it's a category that either applies narrowly to those who would avail themselves of a tactic that causes people to miscalibrate a hazard to themselves and overreact. So, for example, the 9/11 attacks killed 3,000 Americans, and we lost more than 6,000 people fighting on foreign battlefields and spent, many more dollars in fighting off those terrorists than the harm the terrorists were able to inflict. But watching buildings collapse was distorting, right? It's very hard to calibrate how serious a threat the people who were able to make that happen were to the US. And so in some sense, we reacted in a way that did, we reacted in a way that did more measurable harm to us than the terrorists were able to marshal, right? We can talk about whether or not the harm we did to ourselves was worthwhile. Obviously, what happened in Iraq was an abomination as a result of the fact that it was under false pretenses, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. The whole thing, that was just a lie.
Yep. But in any case, so terrorism is a special word. Every time you hear somebody invoke it, you really need to ask the question whether or not they're invoking it because the thing that they're pointing it at is clearly terrorism, or they're invoking it because of all of the things it allows them to do next. And that's the thing that worries me most.
Yeah. Are you communicating, or are you creating a tool, giving yourself power with use of a tool that you will then use in ways that we can probably foresee, but we will not be able to stop once you've invoked the tool?